just saw him a couple weeks ago down by the lake walking with his daughter. I drove by and I saw him there just after the coma thing that happened, and he just was so into his daughter, and that's all I could think about when I heard that he had died.
King County Medical Examiner has just arrived. He spoke briefly with reporters before going into the upstairs apartment where the body was found.
He had a shotgun laying across, pointing to his neck, and there was a suicide note stuck in a potted plant.
I was just shocked. I was so sad. I even cried.
People who were fans, people in their 20s or younger, it hit like a ton of bricks. You know, this person was very important to them. I'm sure this will be remembered as, you know, people will think back and remember where they heard the news that he had died.
In his way, he was the closest equivalent that this decade and this generation of rock fans and rock musicians had to a John Lennon. And I don't make that comparison, you know, easily or facetiously.
My heart is broke.
The reason that an older generation probably doesn't understand what's going on, all the commotion around Kurt's death, is because they can't relate to that cynicism, that anger.
People just don't understand us, because things are different now than they were when our parents were our age. And so we're kind of just lost.
The generation we're talking about has spent its entire sexual prime in the shadow of AIDS. They're the first American generation that knows it will not do better than its parents. They've grown up with lousy schools and astonishing levels of domestic violence, divorce, drug abuse, violence. It's staggering what's happened. And what Kurt Cobain did was give voice to that fear and anger and confusion.
He really didn't care about a lot of things that you're supposed to care about in the public arena. He really just didn't care.
I'm so happy 'cause today found my friends.
You didn't have to wear a certain kind of clothing to go on stage. You didn't have to have your hair a certain way and have it styled. You could just do what you want. You could be who you were and go on stage and relate to the audience as that. They're people, I'm people. You could be up here instead of me.
He grew up in Aberdeen, Washington, which is a lumber town, a very remote lumber town on the western coast of Washington State. People either become lumberjacks or they become unemployed. There's a lot of alcoholism there and a lot of hopelessness. That's what he came out of.
His parents broke up when he was 8 years old. How many kids have gone through this? You know, what's the divorce rate now, 50% or something? And there's an army of kids out there who come from no home and no father or no mother. I mean, who watches these kids, you know? Who listens to them?
Although the lyrics seemed downbeat and dark, the music had a different message. It was often uplifting and transcendent, and it acknowledged your pain and then took you to another higher level.
He sang in a way that he seemed to be exercising some sort of pain, you might say, if you watched him. Didn't know it was that much pain, but obviously it was now, it seems in retrospect. Courtney Love, his wife, said in this letter she taped and had played for people at his memorial service 2 days after he died.
I'm really sorry, you guys. I don't know what I could have done.
Generation X and the Millennials, what we now call Zennials. We had no great war. We had no great common good to bring us together. For our parents and our grandparents' generation, it was easy as hell to get a mortgage. And guess what? A lot of our parents and grandparents didn't pay those loans back. So now it's impossible for our generation to even get a loan and get a home. All the great paying jobs that our parents and our grandparents had, jobs where one man could work and support a family of 5, are gone. These jobs have either been replaced by modern technology or sent overseas for other countries to develop their middle class. Our grandparents, and especially our great-grandparents, called us lazy because they didn't realize that there were no fucking jobs to be had. They were gone, Grandma. Sorry, I can't be a man like Grandpa was. He had a fucking job that paid him 4 times as much as it should have been paying him when he didn't even have a goddamn GED. This is the type of environment that Kurt Cobain and his generation grew up in. Older people calling them lazy. Why don't you quit playing that guitar, spending all your time on art and music, and go out and get a job? Well, geez, unless you haven't left the fucking house in 30 years, all the factories are closed down. Generation X grew up during a time where their teachers told them that a magical bomb was going to fall from the sky and that somehow hiding underneath their desk was going to save their life. And by the way, this could happen at any minute. Your entire life could just go black because a fucking bomb falls from the sky. The Cold War, that's what these people grew up in. That's what they knew as children. The AIDS scare. Generation X was scared to death to even touch someone of the opposite sex in their sexual prime because they were scared to death they were going to die of AIDS. We had absolutely zero prospects, no future, and we were afraid of everything. We were afraid of the world. Then along came Kurt Cobain, and suddenly we did have something. And what Kurt Cobain told us was, stop listening to all the old timers and do your own thing. Be your own person and do what you want to do. It's a new dawn of a new generation. You gotta stop listening to these people who are terrifying you and be brave and do what the fuck you want to do. Kurt Cobain gave us more than just great music. He gave us courage. He gave us independence. We said, you know what? I'm done listening to you, Grandma. I don't need a fucking job. I'm gonna be an entrepreneur. There are no jobs to be had, so I'm gonna be an entrepreneur and I'm gonna do my own thing. And look at how many of those Generation Xers became millionaires and billionaires who went on to be entrepreneurs through the use of the internet and new technology. You know what those guys in Silicon Valley were listening to? They were fucking listening to Nirvana. When Kurt Cobain talks about our little group, those are the outcasts and the nerds and the geeks and the artsy fartsy kids. That's who he's talking about. These kids who went on to revolutionize the way we live. And when we lost Kurt, when we lost that, whether he wanted to be a leader or not, he was a leader. And he gave a lot of us courage to step out into the world on our own and pursue our own independent ventures. When we lost him and Courtney Love told us that she was sorry, we took her at face value. We believed her. But the weeks and months following his death, she proved to be a grieving widow in the public while secretly in private reveling in her newfound fortune and fame. No one knows about public image more than Courtney Love. And when you see her in interviews following Kurt's death, she's crying, she's wearing his coat, she's wearing articles of his clothing. She wants that recognition. She wants pity from the public. She wants his fans to become her fans. But did you know that only 3 weeks after Kurt's death, according to private investigator Tom Grant, she calls him, whispering in the phone, saying that she has to be quiet as to not wake up Billy. She's laying in bed next to a sleeping Billy Corgan. Billy Corgan, who now will headline Lollapalooza 94. And of course, Hole gets added to the list. Thanks to boyfriend Billy, Hole makes several guest appearances throughout the tour, both before, during, and after the Smashing Pumpkins. In 94, another hot band, 9 Inch Nails. 9 Inch Nails' Trent Reznor has discovered Marilyn Manson. How does Courtney manage to get Hole on their tour? She starts up a sexual relationship with Twiggy Ramirez of Marilyn Manson, just a couple months after Kurt died.
I know that Marilyn was up here, and
right.
There's a certain member of his band, and
Twiggy.
Yeah, and
You did him? Oh, he's big? Twiggy is big. You had sex with Twiggy Ramirez?
I was on tour. It was the time they should have locked me in my room.
Wow.
She went from this to this just to further her career. She actually tries to go for the man at the top of the totem pole, Trent Reznor himself. Trent is terrified of Courtney Love. He only added Hole to the tour as a favor to Twiggy and Marilyn. When Courtney starts sending him little gifts and little notes, just like she did Billy Corgan, just like she did Kurt Cobain, Trent hires 2 bodyguards, takes the bodyguards to Courtney with him, and has the bodyguards tell her to never come near his dressing room, stop sending him gifts, leave him the fuck alone. Later on Howard Stern, Courtney will pretend that her and Trent had a sexual relationship, but to this day, he viciously denies it and says that he is afraid of that woman and he never touched her.
It sounds like they had a thing. They were on tour together.
No, it wasn't a big thing. It was a very small thing.
And then he dumped you.
But but he didn't. It wasn't that he just dumped me. He came into the room to dump me with 2 bodyguards outside the door, like as if.
Trent brings the bodyguards because he knows Courtney lies. He does not want her going and saying, Trent did this to me, Trent did that to me. I mean, she used to say Kurt Cobain would point guns at her. So he brings them as witnesses to tell her, you have to stop making passes at me, you have to stop leaving gifts near my dressing room, I'm not interested, if you don't stop, you're gone, you're kicked off the tour. Matter of fact, Trent even later wrote a song partially about Courtney called Starsuckers. If you're interested, there'll be a link in the description below. Trent noticed that Courtney was hopping from rock star to rock star to rock star to get her band on tours. And he wasn't going to be that rock star that she sucked the fame out of. Regular fans like you and I see what's going on. We see these Courtney Love interviews where she's crying, she's wearing articles of Kurt's clothing, talking about how much she misses him. Pity me, I'm the grieving widow. At the same time, we're seeing how much fun she's having with all these other rock stars. Before Kurt's fans, before people who never even met him in their life get over this tragic death, Courtney Love seems to be long over it. And then people start to think, how could the person closest to him already be over it when I'm not even over it? Now, whether you believe that Kurt committed suicide or whether you believe that foul play was involved, no one can deny the fact that very peculiar things happened during the last week of his death, happened after his death. Too many coincidences took place. People ask me, and Mick Wright, who wrote the magazine article about the resurgence of interest in Kurt Cobain murder conspiracy, asked me the same thing. By the way, the author of that article who interviewed me, his name's Mick Wright. He's Broken Bottle Boy on Twitter. He told me that he believes Kurt committed suicide. And he asked me, how can you think this way? What's up with the murder conspiracy? And here's my answer to that. Whether you believe it was a suicide or not is irrelevant. You can't deny that all the things I've talked about in the Nirvana series happened. They were real things that happened, and they were very peculiar things that happened, and therefore I say, why wouldn't you think that foul play could have been involved? Whenever I ask somebody who believes Kurt Cobain committed suicide, well, where's your proof? Why do you think the way you think? All they do is tell me, everybody knew he was suicidal, he was found clutching a gun. Well, that's not really evidence to prove that there was a suicide. The fact that there were no prints on the gun, and that the guy had 3 to 10 times the lethal dose of morphine in his body plus diazepam or Valium pretty much tells you that there was no point in him shooting himself, nor could he have lifted a gun. World famous medical forensic pathologist consultant Dr. Cyril Wecht. We're talking about a guy who was called upon in the mysterious deaths of Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, JFK, Dr. Martin Luther King. This guy knows his stuff. He says he could not think of one single case where the combination of heroin and a gun were used to commit suicide. Not one single case in thousands of cases that he's been involved in.
That deals with coordinative functions. How about the emotional aspects of this? Why would he then shoot himself before the drug has had a chance to take effect? I cannot think of a case in which I have had someone inject himself with a large amount of heroin and then proceed to kill himself. It just doesn't make sense, and it doesn't fit in with these kinds of situations involving heroin.
While we're on the subject of the gun, let me say, for those of you who do not know, the gun was not processed for fingerprints until 30 days later. And all they found was smudge marks by that point. God knows how many people handled that weapon between Kurt's house and the police station. Because the chief medical examiner and the assistant medical examiner, Dr. Harthshorne, telling the Seattle police and the media within minutes of arrival that it was a suicide, how careful in preserving evidence do you think the Seattle Police Department would have been in the handling of that weapon? Let me also talk about Detective Ciesynski. This was the guy who was assigned to the reopening of the Kurt Cobain case. He worked in the cold case unit for 12 years at the Seattle PD. He worked as a homicide detective for 22 years. Of those 22, 12 years he worked in the cold case section. Detective Ciesynski has given many interviews, including to publications. There's even an interview on YouTube. He's interviewed with CBS, and you can tell right from the bat that this is not an objective player. He was determined right from the start to preserve the integrity of the Seattle Police Department. In an interview, he very sarcastically says, "No, I didn't find any earth-shattering evidence to prove it wasn't suicide." He gives you the impression that he thought it was a waste of time to even open up the case to begin with. He even starts a rumor about so-called Kurt Cobain murder conspiracy theorists, in which he says that they started the rumor that the shotgun was given to Courtney Love and she had it melted down. For a long time, I believed that. I thought that they did give it to Courtney and she did destroy it, and in his words, he says that's their proof that she has something to hide. Let me tell you where this rumor comes from right now. April 21st, 1994, the Orlando Sentinel. Courtney Love says she hopes to make some kind of sense out of the suicide of her husband, Kurt Cobain, so she'll turn over the gun he used to an anti-violence group. Love told KIRO TV in Seattle that she'll give the shotgun and other weapons to Mothers Against Violence, which will melt them down. A similar article can also be found in Rolling Stone. This is why people believed that the SPD gave it to Courtney and she had it destroyed, because that's what Courtney was telling us. It wasn't something that murder conspiracy theorists made up on their own. He completely ignores everything I've talked about in my series, reassures us that the original detectives on the case were right. The only thing Detective Ciesynski even does is take pictures of himself posing with the shotgun, and to explain away the shotgun shell being ejected to the wrong side, he says that he questioned a weapons armorer. Not going into any specifics, just says, I questioned a weapons armorer, he told me it's possible. Also, when I had questions about the position of the shotgun found in Cobain's hand and the location of the spent shell casing, I interviewed an experienced weapons armorer who was probably contracted through the Seattle Police Department, who explained the dynamics of what had likely occurred. Okay, what the F does that mean? The shell bounced off the air that was in the room and then ricocheted to the other side of his body? I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be happy until someone outside of the Seattle Police Department who has no interest in preserving their integrity investigated the case. However, I would also want that person to not be a Kurt Cobain fan. I'd want them to be completely objective and just be searching for the truth. Personally, I trust the experts more than I trust a guy who wasn't there at the time and whose main interest is reassuring everybody that his buddies at the police department were correct. Speaking of buddies, did you know that Courtney Love was buddies with Dr. Harthshorne, the assistant medical examiner, who is the one that is responsible for saying it was a suicide only minutes after he arrived? Dr. Harthshorne labeled the cause of death a self-inflicted
shotgun wound to the head
after examining the body for only a few minutes, and was soon telling reporters, I've never seen a more open and shut case of suicide. Going against protocol, going against the chief medical examiner, he tells the reporters and the Seattle PD that it's suicide. You may have known that Courtney was friends with Dr. Harthshorne, or maybe you've heard it before. Let me tell you exactly how long they'd known each other and why. I was raised in a rather large university town, a very large state university town, and during my college years, I played drums in a band. So I got to meet a lot of the students. There was a very vibrant music scene in my town. I met and made friends with a lot of the students who came from Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, Toledo, Akron, even from all over the world, other musicians, or people who just loved being involved in the music scene. I would see them go through their punk rock phase, get a mohawk, tattoos, piercings, but as soon as they graduated and they were going to start their career, they would don that suit and tie and off they would go to become a responsible, respectable citizen. This is what Harthshorne did. In his early life, he meets Courtney and her husband at the time, James Moreland, who probably shocked you, is a singer in a band, and he uses part of a trust fund that came from his grandparents, talking about Harthshorne, to promote punk rock bands. King County Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Nikolas Harthshorne was an old friend of Courtney Love and her ex-husband, James Moreland. During the late 80s, Harthshorne was in the business of promoting punk rock groups. Dr. Harthshorne meets Courtney and her then husband James Moreland in 1988. He actually tries to promote Courtney's first husband, but her first husband has no talent and he goes nowhere. Harthshorne, realizing that he's never going to make any money doing what he's doing because he's no good at it, finishes school, becomes a doctor. Dr. Harthshorne, 2 months later, does the autopsy of Kristen Pfaff. To her death, he attributes accidental overdose. Shortly after Kristen Pfaff's autopsy, he quits his job in a major city where he inevitably would have been promoted to chief medical examiner instead of assistant. And job is the wrong word. This is a very prestigious, prominent, well-respected position in a major city. King County, Seattle, takes a job in a small town in Florida, claiming that he moved because he had fell in love with a dentist there. Whoever that dentist was, nobody knows. Harthshorne never moved in with a lady in Florida. The lady never materialized, but that was the explanation that he gave his friends and colleagues in Seattle, that he had fallen in love with a dentist, an optometrist, in a small town in Florida. He was moving. You literally cannot get any further away from Seattle than Florida. He never speaks about the Cobain case or the Kristen Pfaff case ever again. In fact, one of the friends that he made in Florida said that he did not find out that Dr. Harthshorne did Cobain's autopsy until after he died in 2002. Harthshorne dies of a base jumping accident, which in itself was quite mysterious. Dr. Harthshorne, Nikolas, had successfully jumped 501 times until ultimately he jumped to his death in 2002. Friends he made in Florida didn't even know that he was a Seattle medical examiner. He never spoke of it. Okay, now that we've talked about Courtney's connections to the medical examiner, let me point out a couple of other things, and then we'll talk about her connections with the Seattle Police Department. In Nirvana series number 11, we left off with Courtney Love reading the note. One thing you may have not noticed from that MTV broadcast is during the time Courtney is reading the note, MTV posts the dialogue on the screen for everyone to see. There comes a point in the note where the dialogue in the actual real note says, "I have it good, very good," present tense. But on the screen, the dialogue, while Courtney reads the note, says, "I had it good," past tense. Now, I don't think that I need to explain the implications of this and the mindset that Kurt must have been in while he was writing the note, in which many experts have determined it was a resignation letter to his fans. We can also talk about the last few lines, the very disputed lines. However, let's say, for example, he did write it. How can we explain this away? Well, over the last few weeks, Courtney had been hounding Kurt to do Lollapalooza, and everybody around them, their management, their friends, close personal, involved people in Kurt and Courtney's lives were saying that Courtney kept saying, "You need to do Lollapalooza for Frances, for her. It's a lot of money, Kurt. Do it for Frances. Even if you don't want to do it for Frances." Now, Kurt knew how much Courtney loved her image, how much Courtney wanted to be a rock star, how much she wanted to be a mainstream success, a famous person. He could have been saying, "I'm quitting and I'm leaving, but you do it, Courtney. Keep going for Frances. Francis. Keep plugging away at your music career. You're doing great. You're going to do better. You can be successful without me. You don't need me to do it. Do it for Francis. Even though we are divorcing, I'll be at your altar. I'll always be there for you. We have a child together. You can always count on me. You can always count on me, but I'm getting the hell out of the music industry. Good luck. Guys and gals, I have decided that there will be yet more Nirvana series videos. I had a 47-minute long video that was going to end the series, and I got copyright blocked. There were clips in it. Several had Courtney Love. This is something that's never happened to me before. Typically, whoever owns the copyright will accept the ad revenue and allow the video to be viewed. For whatever reason, when I uploaded Nirvana number 12, the ending, it was completely blocked. Completely blocked. So I had to take certain clips out of it that I believe probably belonged to Courtney Love. And I know that it's just me because these clips are on other channels and they're not copyright blocked on other channels. Call me crazy, but I'm pretty damn sure that my channel's been flagged by a certain somebody. So I have to work with clips that are not owned by anyone in that camp. I hope that makes sense to you. Besides that, people were telling me that they would enjoy a couple more episodes anyway. So I thought when this happened earlier, it was actually yesterday on the 4th, it's about 3:30 in the morning. I literally stayed up all night to rework the video, take out the clips, do something totally different because I promised everybody there'd be a video on the anniversary of Kurt's death. I hope you guys don't mind the inconvenience. There will be 1 or 2 more videos popping up very soon. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave me a like if you learned something new, or maybe just because you liked the damn video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.